Saki had died from her illness, none of the subunits would have formed, and the entire lore of Project Sekai would be unrecognizable. Her existence is the key that holds together the entire Project Sekai universe, hence the name, the Saki glue theory. So what exactly is the Saki glue theory? To clear up some confusion, it's definitely not about Saki eating glue. The theory appeared on various Project Sekai forums around 2023 and argues that if Saki had died while in the hospital from her undisclosed illness, her death would have caused a chain reaction resulting in none of the subunits ever forming, and we would have no game. A quick overview of the Project Sekai lore for those who play the game for only its rhythm or gacha aspects, or if you somehow stumbled onto this corner of YouTube somehow and know nothing about this game. The game's plot takes place in modern-day Tokyo and is centered around 20 high school-age students evenly split into 5 subunits: Leonid, More Jump, Vivid Bad Squad, Wonderland's Showtime, and Nightcord. Each subunit and character has their own stories and arcs in which they overcome their personal struggles. Through the magic of Hatsune Miku and the power of friendship, each subunit's resolve created their own magical world called a Sekai, in which each subunit gets their own version of Hatsune Miku and the other Vocaloid, and it's like a little world they can all transport to. Now let's go through each subunit one at a time and see how the Saki glue theory affects them. Let's start off with the first subunit in the game, Leonid, which consists of 4 girls: Ichika, Saki, Honami, and Shiho. The 4 are childhood friends but drift apart after Saki is hospitalized for an unnamed chronic illness while they're in elementary school. Years later, Saki returns to high school without any notice, and through a series of heart-to-heart conversations and Saki's fond memories of her friend group, the 4 reconcile and become a band called Leonid. Now, Leonid is by far the most obvious. It's unlikely that without Saki, the other 3 would have ever made any attempt to really talk with the others, considering how emotionally close they all were at the beginning of Leonid's main story. Even with Saki's persistence in getting the band back together. Plus, before Saki returned to school, Ichika and Honami weren't even actively practicing their instruments. So, if Saki had died, and by some chance Ichika, Honami, and Shiho were able to emotionally connect, it's not certain they would have ever formed a band without Saki. Now for Wonderland's Showtime, which consists of 4 individuals, Tsukasa, Emu, Nene, and Dui, let's quickly recall their main story. Tsukasa wants to be a famous star, and there is an amusement park called Phoenix Wonderland. They're hosting an audition, he goes to it, and the only reason he gets a job is because Emu, who is the Nebo baby of a family who owns the theme park, hires him. And through a wacky chain of events, he meets 2 other characters named Dui and Nene, and the 4 of them become Wonderland Showtime. But during their debut show, Nene is performing via a robot because she is shy, which ends up malfunctioning, causing the show to flop. Tsukasa takes out his frustration on Nene afterwards, causing the group to break up. Later on, in the Wonderland Sekai, Tsukasa remembers the whole reason he wanted to be a star in the first place was to make people smile, like his little sister Saki, who was sick, and not just because he wanted to be famous. He apologizes to the 3 individually, and Wonderland Showtime is back in show business. But if Saki had died, Tsukasa would have given up on becoming a star most likely, so he never would have gone to the interview, Emu never would have seen his interview, and Wonderland's Showtime never forms. Now on to our 3rd group, Vivid Bad Squad. The formation of Vivid Bad Squad, which consists of Kohane, An, Akito, and Toya, is a bit different compared to the other groups. Vivid Bad Squad started as 2 distinct pairs, Toya and Akito being rad dogs, with An and Kohane being the Vivids. Eventually the 2 pairs merged together to form VBS after both sharing the common goal of surpassing this event they witnessed as a child called Rad Weekend, and the Street Sekai is formed as a combination of all of their feelings. Now the main link Saki has to Vivid Bad Squad is Toya. Toya is childhood friends with Saki and Tsukasa, so much so that the 2 boys see each other as brothers. If Saki had died, there's no doubt that Toya would have mourned her death due to being childhood friends, but how would her death stop him from forming Rad Dogs with Akito and eventually Vivid Bad Squad? Well, Rad Dogs was formed when Akito and Toya met during middle school and they decided to start making street music together. But we learned during Toya's first focus event period of Nocturne that Toya had abandoned classical music and piano, much to the disapproval of his father. And this only happened because the person who encouraged Toya to do what he wants regardless of others' disapproval and quit classical music is Tsukasa. So if Saki had died, Tsukasa would have been a fundamentally different person and most likely wouldn't have encouraged Toya to quit classical music, thus Rad Dogs would never exist. Now you're thinking, even if there's no Rad Dogs, that doesn't necessarily mean Akito may have joined An and Kohane later on. But without Rad Dogs, even Akito might not have continued singing. When Akito was in elementary school, he had quit soccer after losing an important tournament, even though he was one of the best on the team. Without Toya by his side, it's possible that Akito would have eventually quit singing without someone supporting him through all his personal challenges. For example, during Akito's first focus event, Stray Bad Dog, we learned Akito sees himself as the weak link in VBS. This is further exaggerated by a new character, Adata, who kind of shits on Akito for sucking. Both of these combined caused Akito to kind of go on a spiral of trying to do events solo in an effort to improve himself. And if it wasn't for the rest of Vivid Bad Squad being by his side, Akito's own stubbornness most likely would have put him on the path to burnout. This event is a clear example that shows Akito needs the rest of Vivid Bad Squad to succeed, as his own stubbornness would most likely cause him to burn out and quit singing altogether. Now the Vivids, on the other hand, would have probably still formed without Akito and Toya, but their long-term fate is murky without Rad Dogs. For many of An's early event stories, it's clear that there were some interpersonal problems between her and Kohane, such as during An's first focus event, Singing in Sync, where VBS entered a singing competition but lost due to Kohane's inexperience performing. An feels bad for failing to help Kohane during the performance, but Akito gives An mad shit for babying Kohane and not treating her as a true equal. After talking with a bunch of people, An and Kohane realize their shortcomings, have a heart-to-heart, and promise to become true partners. Without Akito there, An might have never realized she was babying Kohane, stunting the growth of Kohane and thus the Vivids in the long run. Another example is during An's second focus event, Bout for Beside You, we learned that An is worried Kohane will leave her behind, and it's only because of Akito An even able to realize this feeling at all. All this yapping is to say that if Saki had died, Toya's probably not doing street music because he's not quitting classical music. Akito probably also quits music because he doesn't have the support of Toya and the rest of the Vivid Bad Squad by his side. There's no Rad Dog, there's no virtual singers in the street Sekai, and thus An's complex feelings towards Kohane would never get addressed, and it's very possible the Vivids never would have made it far as just a duo. Quick disclaimer before we get into Nightcord and more stuff. From here on, the Saki glue theory begins to require a little bit more suspension of disbelief, so really put on your tinfoil hats for these next two sections. Let's dive into Nightcord, which consists of 4 girls, Kanade, Mafuyu, Ena, and Mizuki. Before we go into Nightcord's connection with the Saki glue theory, let's address the retcon. For context, a retcon is when the narrative of a story directly contradicts a fact given earlier in the story, changing some plot point. In Mizuki's third focus event, And Now I Wear This Ribbon, we learned that Mizuki and Ena knew each other before joining Nightcord. However, in the original Nightcord main story, Kanade had recruited each member of Nightcord individually to form the group. But in both cases, the Saki glue theory has, albeit small, basis for arguing Nightcord would have never formed if Saki had died. Both versions of Nightcord's origin story, the connection between Nightcord and the Saki glue theory is based on this fact. Regardless of the Shinonome siblings' infamous bickering, both Ena and Akito do care about each other. And without Rad Dogs, Akito most likely would have stayed home more, thus giving him the chance to notice Ena's personal struggles with being an artist and her toxic relationship with their dad. Now, with more emotional support, Ena might not have turned to external validation such as posting selfies or her art online. For the updated origin story where Mizuki and Ena joined Nightcord together, Mizuki and Kanade only meet because Mizuki had seen an illustration Ena had made for one of Kanade and Mafuyu's songs, which leads to Nightcord creation. Without Ena, it's not certain that Mizuki would have made the MV that leads to them meeting Kanade. So at the minimum, Nightcord is now just a duo, and in the worst case scenario, if Mafuyu still goes rogue, like in Nightcord's main story, Kanade alone might not have been able to convince Mafuyu to try and find herself and not disappear. And even for the original origin story where Kanade recruits everyone individually, when Mafuyu goes rogue, there is no guarantee that without Ena, Kanade and Mizuki alone could have convinced Mafuyu to keep trying to find herself. Thus, in both versions of Nightcord's origin story, without Ena, there is no Nightcord. And now for our final subunit, More Jump, which consists of 4 girls, Minori, Haruka, Ari, and Shizuku. Before joining More Jump, Shizuku had been a part of another idol group called Cheerful Days, but Shizuku only ended up becoming an idol in the first place was because her friends signed her up to an audition without her knowledge. As an idol, Shizuku became the most popular in her group, causing a lot of jealousy amongst her group mates, enough that I could even cut it with my invisible knife. There are 2 lines of reasoning for how the Saki glue theory causes More Jump to never be formed. The first one is that after Saki's death, Shizuku would quit being an idol to help Shiho mourn, since Shizuku and Shiho are siblings and Shizuku has a lot of affection for her younger sister. But the likelihood of that happening varies on when exactly Saki would die. If Saki had died before the formation of More Jump and before Shizuku left Cheerful Days, Shizuku would have been way more likely to quit being an idol due to the existing hostility her groupmates had towards her. But if Saki had died during the More Jump main story after Shizuku had the argument with Ari that lead to her leaving Cheerful Days, but before More Jump is formed, then it's even more unlikely Shizuku would have joined More Jump, since Shizuku has no obligation to join another idol group at this point and probably would prioritize helping Shiho mourn. However, if Saki had died after Shizuku joined More Jump, the likelihood Shizuku would leave the group decreases over time, since More Jump becomes more and more successful as the game's plot progresses. The second line of reasoning is even more far-fetched. Add some more tinfoil to your hats, everybody. Previously, the Saki glue theory concluded that Enna would have been more emotionally supported by Akito, and she would have more emotional capability to support those around her, like her best friend since middle school, Ari. After Ari quits being an idol and with more emotional support from Enna, it's possible that Ari is able to move past all her complicated feelings of being an idol and has no desire to join More Jump. Thus, if Saki had died, the 2 main reasons More Jump wouldn't have formed is Shizuku would have quit being an idol to help Shiho mourn, and Ari never would have became an idol again because Enna, who is no longer part of Nightcord, has more emotional capability to support Ari, and Ari would have moved past all of her complicated idol feelings. So now that we've gone over how every single group would not exist if Saki had died, let's address the 2 major gripes fans have against this theory. 1, this theory absolutely does boil Saki down to just her illness, but like my How Akito Caused Mizu 5 video, these theories are more what if butterfly effect scenarios rather than evidence-based scientific hypothesis and shouldn't really be taken that seriously. 2, even I can acknowledge some of these conclusions are a bit of a stretch, especially More Jump and Nightcord. Regardless, it's still interesting to think about how interconnected all of the subunits and characters are to one another. So think of this video as a record of all Project Sekai fandom history and treat the theory with the same level of wackiness as the birds aren't real conspiracy theory.
But it's more than just Gen Z's falling for conspiracy theories. Why?
Oh my god, I'm so nervous, I'm so sorry.
Now, do I think the Saki glue theory is true? Only somewhat. The death of Saki would 100% cause Leonid and Wonderland's Showtime to not exist. While Vivid Bad Squad, I'm only somewhat certain about. The other 2 subunits, More Jump and Nightcord, are definitely stretches, but not completely outside the realm of possibility. There's definitely a non-zero chance that if Saki had died, those 2 subunits wouldn't exist, in the same way that there is always very small chance that you could be attacked by a gorilla at any given time. Ultimately, I thought the Saki glue theory was gonna take me down a deep rabbit hole of convoluted and vague conclusions, which some of them were. Instead, what I found at the end of the conspiracy theory tunnel was a deeper appreciation for the characters and writing in the game with how all of their stories are interconnected with one another. But hey, that's just a theory. A Project Sekai theory.